All right, we got a good turnout. Nice. Well, first off, I'll start with thanking everybody for coming. So I know it's Halloween is tomorrow, so those of you with kids, I'm sure, are super excited to get back and do some trick-or-treating. So thank you for everybody that made it out here. We're super excited to have all you guys and gals here, and we're going to go through a little bit of introduction of myself, my company, and then we'll talk a little bit about, like we talked about, Beyond the Broker. So Jensen did a great job of introducing how MQTT sits at the center of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And I'm kind of going to go through the value side of generation from building these types of ecosystems around MQTT and why we at Concept Reply have partnered strongly with HiveMQ around that idea. So I'll start with a little bit about Reply. So we are a global system integrator. We are headquartered out of Italy. We have about 16,000 people worldwide. But what's really unique about us is the configuration of that group of people. So we're split across about 180 different operating companies. Every one of the companies is created to focus on a specific industry, vertical, or technology. So like you saw earlier, was Concept Reply. We are headquartered in Detroit, and we focus on the world of connected things. So connected product, connected factory, connected devices. We work with customers all the way from connected vehicle to digital infrastructure around factory connectivity and everything in between. We have offices all over the world, and at the center of that, which I think kind of ties in really nicely with the introduction that was given, is that we believe that AI is essentially the transformation thing that's going to help us all move into the next generation of manufacturing and IT/OT data. So at Reply, we focus significantly on IT or on AI, even so much so that just recently we created a company that will focus solely on OpenAI. So like we said, with 180 different companies, we have the ability to be agile in the way we structure our teams. And so around AI, we've built a lot of companies that support that type of initiative. And at the end, like Jen said, there will be questions. So feel free to interrupt me, but hopefully we can wait till the end and then we'll get to some good questions. So I'm going to start with, if we look at the world of manufacturing, IT and OT, the last 10 years we've spent on trying to figure out how to connect assets. We really struggled over the last 10 years initially to figure out how do we get data off of devices? How do we get data off of PLCs, off of sensors, off of IoT sensors, IIoT sensors? We really struggled in that space. But over the last 10 years, we've really seen that that problem has essentially been solved. We have a lot of tools at our disposal now, a lot of them that are part of this ecosystem that we're talking about today with HiveMQ and inductive automation and Litmus and Tulip and all these different platforms that allow us to build that connectivity that was significantly more challenging before. Once we've created that connectivity, the next challenge is to create value from that data. You'll hear that theme across my presentation quite a bit on how do we generate value from everything that we're connecting and all the platforms that we're deploying. Value for me is the significant thing that I try to deliver to customers. When I talk to a customer for the first time, I don't talk about technology until meeting 3 or 4. Generally, what I'm trying to understand is where can I provide value? My goal as an integrator with any one of my customers is to understand where I can plug in to drive value for them, whether it's through uptime, quality increases, throughput increases, anything in that space, AI leverage. Our goal is to drive value. So when I talk to customers, everything is around that. What problem are you trying to solve? And how can we use this ecosystem approach to help you solve that problem? And I should have did that before I started talking about it. But a goal here, again, after the connectivity, we got to turn that data into value, being number one. But to get to that value, we have to trust the data. Because what you'll, I'm sure, have seen is if we build dashboards in a factory and throw up a whole bunch of information and it's wrong, the trust in that data goes away quickly and our solutions die pretty quick on the vine, right? Once we have the trust, we have the value, we have to create the context to get that value as well. So data on its own doesn't mean a whole lot. But when we look at leveraging AI, we really have to create that context around the data so that we can apply those tools in that space. So if you look at the modern factory data platform, a lot of you will recognize that left-hand side, the typical Purdue model, ISA 95 pyramid, or whatever you want to call it. But that's essentially where we were yesterday. There's a Y at the end of that. And so we had a lot of, siloed systems, a lot of standalone applications. This is still true in a lot of different manufacturing customers, right? We still see this, I would say, I'll show of hands, probably 80% of the manufacturers out there that we talk to. It doesn't mean that we've solved it. It's not completely yesterday, but if we're talking about where we're going to move the industry, it is a yesterday thinking to create a system like that. And so what we want to focus on is how do we get rid of the data silos? How do we leverage cloud computing? How do we create protocols, MQTT, that we can leverage across different platforms, different applications? and build this integration layer that's going to help us move into that future state of tomorrow, where essentially our OT border is gone. You're in the no longer in the Internet of Things space, but we're now in the Internet of Everything space. Everything is connected. Everything can talk to itself. We can drive value at any level of that side of the dial by leveraging the connectivity that we've built in the last few stages. And so really the goal of what we're trying to do and what you'll see throughout this is to understand how we move from that yesterday picture to the tomorrow picture that should have a Y at the end of it. So that value, what is that value? Is it tangible? Can we measure it? Absolutely. This is a slide that I put into all of my pitch decks, and it's usually the first slide in my deck, especially if I'm talking to a CFO, because I want to hit them with the value slide right away. I want them to understand before we start talking about technology or anything like that, that the initiatives that they're taking on around digital transformation, around building an ecosystem for data, there is value to be generated. And to the tune of 5 to 15% of EBITDA. Those that don't know of EBITDA, it's the measure of profitability of a company. And so when we do these things, and this is validated across a lot of different studies, you can find this from McKinsey, you can find this from the World Economic Forum. This is a conservative number that we've been able to estimate with our customers, that we can drive 5 to 15% of profitability. And depending on the size of your company, that can be significant. I can tell you a story from my life and my background in manufacturing. That number was closer to 40% because we were able to solve a quality problem that had been plaguing our company for 30 years by leveraging this idea of an ecosystem play to solve a challenge that was significant. If you want to find me later, I'll tell you the whole story. It's a really fun one. So what else do we use to drive that value, right? So we talked about the one I just said around quality, but it's also throughput, OEE, right? There's a lot of people that don't like OEE as a measurement, but I tend to like it a lot because it gives us a really good idea and understanding of where we need to point our attention to solve throughput of a factory, right? It's not a real-time metric, it's a lag metric. We all know that. But when used correctly, we can use it to drive understanding of how to increase our throughput and our performance of a factory. There's also other things like reduced operating expenses, having better visibility into all those different things in our factory. We can understand where our pain points are, where our lag is, where our idea of waste is, spoilage, if you want to call it that. We can look at overtime reduction. Because we have more data, we can understand where to identify shift patterns and what we can look at in that space, and then inventory, yield improvement, and so on and so forth. You can see here, like again, value is at the core of generally what we're trying to do and drive this type of driving these types of initiatives. So what does that value look like when we try to apply it into a manufacturing site? So you saw all those KPIs that we just showed. We generated all that value. How do we get to that point of driving information to that set? What I like to say is that in Industry 4.0 for me, my definition is that it is the connection of assets in a factory, both human and machine, to deliver information to people that can act upon it the fastest. This is intended to show that those people that can act upon data the fastest within an organization vary greatly. When we're looking at real-time information, we have to understand that that is a work step level event. That is in front of an operator that needs information to do their job second by second, millisecond by millisecond. They need something in front of them that helps us drive value to them right away. Information, not just data, information, right? We talk about context around all of that. That's why I say information and not just data. As you move up the chain, you'll start to see that a lot of the KPIs might be the same, but we're looking at them at a different granularity. So we're not looking at work step and real-time information anymore. Maybe we're looking at end of shift, end of day, end of week. You've probably heard the term win the shift, win the day, win the week. This is where that starts to come into play. We really want to understand, how do we build an ecosystem around delivering information at every level of an organization, because that's where we can drive value. So if we're looking at tier 6 global operations, they don't really care about the second by second operation of a machine, that machine was down for 7 minutes yesterday. They care more about, what does the quarter look like? What does the year look like? What does my product line across multiple sites look like? The only way we can get to this point where we can create this persona-driven approach to data is by building an ecosystem around a flexible platform like HiveMQ, so that we can get to that stage. So now you've seen the value. We've talked a lot about how do we get there, what is the tools that we use to do that, how do we drive that. And I believe that now that we've kind of solved that connectivity problem, I'll say that lightly, solved it. We still see a lot of manufacturers struggling to get there, but the tools are there. They just need to have the courage to adopt them, we'll say, right? And I'm sure you've all seen it quite a bit. So now that we're kind of getting into this space of, we've created the platform, we've connected all our machines, we understand value, and we now have a problem identified that we want to try to go solve. But as we know in manufacturing, it's not just IoT data that drives that problem solving. There are other systems that feed data into this idea of the ecosystem that are going to help us solve this problem. HR data, ERP data, MRP data, MRO data, everything you can imagine, right? And so what we strongly believe, to get to that next era of interoperability, there is a transformation piece that has to happen. We have our factory data. The new layer that we're starting to see emerge quite a bit is the one that connects it to all the UNS, the edge, the cloud, the AI, that data ops layer. This is the platform layer of how we get access to factory data. And then you'll see in the next slide, it's not just factory data, but this is the thinking that we want to move to form an ecosystem to standardize data, contextualize data, build a trust foundation to unlock the value. When we look at that in tangible approach, this is very similar to the slide you saw earlier where I had on the left-hand side that ISA 95 pyramid. So you'll still see here the level 0, the level 1s, the level 2s and 3s and 4s. But what's different, what we added, is that data ops layer. The layer in the middle that a lot of people call the Unified Namespace. It's been around a long time. We just now have something to actually call it, thanks to Walker Reynolds and his team. We have a name for it. But it's been there for a very long time. We've been creating this idea of data models at different levels of that stack for a really long time, but now we have something to call it and we have a place that it lives. And that's kind of what I'm intending to show here. All of this with the goal of building the ecosystem approach to leveraging that data. Because if we can build a platform that has access to these different systems of information, different systems of data, then if I want to build a work order management tool today, I have all the data I need. I have all the integration, I have all the interoperability. I just need the platform approach to start unlocking that data. If tomorrow it's real-time shop floor reporting, I already have it. All I have to do now is focus on building applications and talking to my organization of where to unlock value. I'll give you a great example. Yesterday I had to go back to Detroit to work on an event called Stellantis Booster Day. So yesterday, you would have probably seen it on our marketing if you follow us. Stellantis had this idea that they were going to send 100 challenges out, or a survey to all of their factories to try and find the biggest pain points across 130-something factories. They sent a survey out and said, tell us your biggest challenge. What are your pain points? What do you struggle with every day? They collected the top 100 of those challenges and released it to their supplier base and said, here are our biggest challenges. How are you going to solve them? And if you have an idea to solve them, please submit it and we'll showcase you at an event held completely internally to Stellantis at one of their factories, showcasing all of this ability to look at solving problems. I walked those booths yesterday. There was a few that missed the idea, but most of them were building this without even realizing they were building it. They were solving these problems by getting access to data on the shop floor. Understanding how can we get to data off of a robot, data off of a lift assist, data off of a torque tool, data off of a digital twin. Everything was, they didn't even realize they were doing it, but everything was talking about the data operations layer of unlocking factory data. So this is kind of intended to show, and that logo at the top is intended to be generic because every platform is different for every customer. Some customers it's AWS, some it's Snowflake, some it's Databricks. Every one of them at that ecosystem application level can be different. So that's kind of intended to be there. So I keep saying so, I hate that. We go on to this idea around the ecosystem approach. And obviously, we're all here for HiveMQ. So where does HiveMQ fit in this idea of the ecosystem, this approach to all of this? And so in my opinion, and I think the HiveMQ folks will agree, HiveMQ we see is not just an MQTT broker, right? That's absolutely one of their very strong cases, but it's not all it is, right? I think there is a significant advancement that they've done over the past couple of years, obviously with the release of Pulse, which hopefully comes out pretty soon, Magnus, within the next... It's out, okay, so it's official now, all right, so we can start using it, awesome, great. But again, this kind of ties into that idea that we're trying to build a platform, and to build a platform, you have to have this ability to connect to a wide variety of different data sources. You have to create trust. We have to know that that platform has access to data and that it's in a reliable, secure, trustworthy way. We have to have the idea of context, which is, I think, what Pulse is intended to do, is right, build context around that data, because just because we can get the data doesn't mean that we can make something valuable of it. So adding something like Pulse to this ecosystem play, for me, I think is one of the biggest significant advantages that's going to come out of this platform approach, because now I can have 1 million sensors online and give them context after the fact. I can give them context in motion. As that data is flowing to its destination, I can create additional value before it ever gets there without any capital expense. And then obviously the extensions. So as we look at, like we said, I mentioned earlier, Databricks and Snowflake and Kafka and AWS and Azure, and then AI just generically, because there's so many of them now, it's hard to keep up. But the extensions that we find to be very valuable for our customers, because now I have this platform that's accessing all this information, and I can send it to whatever ecosystem generic logo I showed you earlier in the slide, to whatever system that we've chosen as a company. And as we see a lot with customers now, that's starting to become multiple different endpoints, which is again the kind of this power of the publish subscribe idea around data ecosystems and data platforms. Because I might be Azure today, I might be AWS tomorrow. I don't want to have to rebuild all of my connectivity just because I decided that AWS was going to give me more money if I signed a MAC agreement. And then obviously we talked about governance and security and trust. I think that's kind of just one of the core elements that's built into this platform idea. You'll see the guys that follow me after this will talk a little bit more about that, and they'll get into some technical weeds around a lot of this type of stuff. My goal is to kind of just set the stage for them to wow you. So what does that look like as we look at, again, driving that value broader beyond the just ecosystem of a factory? So we understand within a manufacturing environment that manufacturing doesn't stop the minute the product leaves the door. Quality doesn't stop when the product leaves the factory, right? We have warranties, we have service returns, we have customer feedback. All of that plays a role in building this idea that we can generate value from the data that's being created. Think about a vehicle that leaves Stellantis' factory, since we mentioned Stellantis, right? That vehicle for the next 10 years is going to be transmitting data back to an ecosystem so that they can unlock value. They want to understand customer feedback. They want to understand what parts are failing frequently so that we can change our manufacturing process, what products are selling well. All of that type of stuff is all part of this convergence between not just the factory, but everything else in the space, even into the supply chain, the things within our factory that are not machines, right? Energy sensors, energy monitors, cameras. Cameras are an unbelievably untapped resource right now in factories. And I think what we're seeing a lot right now with this idea of AI is computer vision, right? We're tapping into security cameras that have been in a factory forever, and building new tools on top of those image streams using computer vision AI. It's really, really interesting space. But then also, like we talked about, the in-feeding material, supply chain and logistics, your shipping, your warehousing, all of those types of things. Everywhere we look in this world of connectivity, there's data being generated. And again, we want to tie into how do we get value from the data? The only way to do that is with a platform that allows us to get access to it. How am I doing on time? Good. I want to open it up for questions. I know I kind of breezed through that a little quicker than I intended to. Well, I'll kind of give some final thoughts and this idea that we've sort of kind of solved that connectivity problem. And as we've solved that problem, the interoperability is the next challenge, right? How do we take this connectivity layer that we've built and create this interoperability layer with other platforms so that we can really start to drive value? And there's a lot of platform people here, I think I see. So there's going to be a lot of good networking and talking later today. The ecosystem, it delivers that shared value across partners and platforms, right? So I, as a partner, we are a system integration company like we talked about. I'm looking for the best tool I can use to help my customers solve problems. My customers are manufacturing generally, but they vary a little bit. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is to deliver that shared value. And then open standards like MQTT and HiveMQ are the foundation of that shared data value and that foundation. And then again, we talk about how the future of IoT and IIoT, it is collaborative. It is this ecosystem approach. It is AI-driven. It is built on open ecosystems, right? So this is, again, I think why a lot of us here are interested, because HiveMQ has kind of become that open ecosystem for us to build these different applications and values. And that was that. I did go through that a lot quicker than I wanted to. But yeah, I'll open it up for questions and everything there. Questions, comments, concerns about how I spelled yesterday?
The Y was silent, right?
Yeah, the Y was silent. It's a silent Y.
What was that?
Go ahead. Either one. Brian.
I was going to say on the story. What were the details on that one story?
Yeah, I will get into that. Let's go to his question, and then I'll definitely go to that.
This platform or the ecosystem are you seeing mostly people just need it for real-time data, or is there historical data?
All sorts of data, historical as well, right? You need access to historical data. Where you put that data is a little gray area right now. Some people say the UNS should be a historian. I disagree. Should not be a historian. That's not what it's for. The UNS, in my opinion, is a data river. So if you think about the concept of a data lake, the data river is intended to deliver information to somewhere where we can leverage large batches of historical data. So I believe that the UNS is essentially, or the data river is essentially sent to deliver that information to somewhere with context. So historians are extremely valuable. I'll give you an example of a project I actually just partnered with HiveMQ on around yield optimization. So we have a customer that has a lot of historical data and a lot of real-time data, and they want to understand when these environment variables are true on the line, what has the historical yield been of that product? And then ultimately to get to the goal of, could we build a machine learning model that can adjust those environment variables in real time to optimize the yield of that product? So, sort of, gray area. Anybody else, or should I jump in? Yeah, go ahead.
Ask a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I probably know the answer, but just for the benefit of the folks
Absolutely.
here, I'm going to ask, right? I mean,
100% Robbie knows the answer already.
obviously, you have streaming data, obviously MQTT data that's bringing streaming data, right?
Yep.
Often, like I think we were talking also, like data is sitting in on all of these different silos, historical data, the different formats. How do you kind of like optimally do it? And maybe there is not an easy answer to this, but how do you? What is the best practice in like bringing all this data together, ensuring that they kind of like gel with each other, especially like unstructured data versus structured data, and also like third-party data. Let's not forget that.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's kind of what the...
Especially when you talk about camera and things like that, right? I mean, how do you bring that to then make sure that it lines up? Like you have a tag, but then the tag has like connections with all of these different other data, right? What are some of the best practices that you've...
Great question. So my approach may be a little different than some of the others you'll see today, and I think we're all aligned in the direction. We just have different approaches to it. My approach is always to identify a business problem that we're trying to solve first, and then use that business problem to start the foundation of what that's going to look like. So if it's vision first, then let's understand how we're going to leverage a platform. Start small, think big, scale fast type of idea. So we may have this idea to solve this one specific problem, but I want to be thinking about the larger ecosystem play. So what we've seen with our customers, because we've had some, and thanks to Walker and his team on the broadcasting this idea of the UNS, we've had customers come to us and say, I want a UNS. I need a UNS. I have to have a UNS. And we're like, great. That's awesome. Why? And they're like, what do you mean why? Because I need a UNS. I've seen it on the interwebs. I need a UNS. Great. Yeah. Also that, right? And so we ask that question a lot of why? Why do you need a UNS? And then ultimately what we try to get them to thinking about is using that as a tool to solve problems. This specific customer that I won't name came to us kind of this same world, and it was like 2 or 3 weeks of meetings of trying to get them to stop thinking about structuring data first, but using a business problem to start that process. Because if we have something in mind to achieve, then we have a really good measurement of did we get there. If we just start with structuring data on a UNS, how do we ever know if we unlocked something? Like okay, now we moved all this data from a bunch of different data silos to one giant data silo. What did I do with that? So really what I take with our customers is just really trying to tie that back to what kind of problem are we trying to solve. And this one, the specific customer was predictive maintenance is where we landed. Right now we have something that we can measure. So let's start looking at what data do we need to get to that point of predictive maintenance.
Yeah, I really love your approach to first focus on the business value that you want to create, because you won't get really... So what we are talking about is overall is digital transformation of an organization.
Yeah.
And this is an anti-impact not only on the technology, but also on the organization will change. It's a political thing, so technology is never the problem, right?
Yeah.
So you really need. That's really important. The first thing that you should get is executive buy-in, and the executive is focusing on, okay, what's the value of it? You will not convince the CEO of a company to go for a new technology because of the new technology, right? That's the same direction. Oh, we need a UNS. I've got something on an industry fair, right? Yeah. We need a UNS. We need AI. We need agentic. So why? Yeah, I don't know, but they told us.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen, like we talked about with as an integrator, my goal is to get sticky with customers, right? I want to drive value so that they keep using us as a entity to drive this type of stuff. So if I don't give them anything tangible that they can measure and that I can show, hey, we did generate value, here it is, we won't have a job for very long. And so our goal is to continue to provide that value. And so this is, again, when we go back, okay, now that we've solved that business problem, we have these tools in place that we can now start to attack different problems. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because 20 years ago, we called it different things,
Yeah.
but it was data. And the failures were all people that concentrated on data, and the successes were all people that concentrated on the issues.
Exactly.
It didn't change. And,
Yep.
you know, the technology has changed. It's easier to do.
Yeah.
It's faster, it's cheaper, all that. But the concepts of solved problems has not changed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we see it all over the place, right? The companies that are being successful, Tesla is successful not because they make great cars, because they leverage their data that's generated out of those factories in those cars, right? I'll say that Tesla kind of makes crappy cars, but go on.
Yeah, the question about that real-time data and when the upper management needs that real-time data or not, you know, because I like that shift today and all that.
Yeah.
So does upper management needs real-time data? I think this is one of the conversations I've been having because, you know, real-time data, do we need that on the production floor where we can take actions rather than a lag indicator? We need a lead indicator down there, you know, and global operation needs to see, hey, I need efficiency. I need to know if I need to buy more machines or if I need to improve my efficiency, right?
Yep.
So my question is, do we need real-time visibility in the global operation in that tier 5 or 6?
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on it?
So I think kind of ties back into how I define Industry 4.0, right? So the goal of driving value is to deliver information to people that can act upon it the fastest. And so if the CEO is the person that can affect my real-time downtime because he's going to go out there and turn some wrenches, great, let's give him the information real time. Absolutely. But if he's not, then let's give it to the person that can affect it the fastest. And at the CEO level, or maybe if it's plant manager or COO, if you're talking about capacity of equipment, then we're going to deliver information to that. Does the operator on the floor need to know that the capacity of the entire factory? No, they only care about the machine in front of them. How can they get the most out of that machine? So when we look at the question you asked, I would say it depends. And it depends on who can solve that problem the fastest. And then creating that ecosystem of data that can drive that person the information they need to solve that problem very quickly. We did that a lot in my previous life.
Everybody talks about how we need to get real-time data into the CEO, and I don't agree with that because, you know, he can't take any decisions.
Yeah, what's he going to do with it? Yeah.
Exactly. He's going to have a dashboard on his cell phone, and that what kind of value that's going to drive, right?
Yeah.
The value is really going to be driving on down there. Is the machine, the V curve, is the machine on the speed that's supposed to be,
right?
You know, and all that kind of stuff. So I really like it. So.
Yeah, there's a separate slide. Ping me after. I'll show you the second one that goes into all the KPIs that drive each individual level and the 4 strategy pillars behind it. Because it's not just information around the machines themselves. There's also, like we talked about, the idea of different sets of data, like the human element of it, right? People, process, technology. The people element is super important as well. And so one of the strategy pillars across this line is the environmental human piece of it as well. Because we have to have an engaged workforce if we want to be successful. An operator that shows up that hates their life and hates their job is not going to hates the job, not hates life. Hates their job is not going to be as efficient as someone that loves to be there, is engaged, is interested in creating more value for the company. But I'll go back. I'll challenge you a little bit because just because we say CEO, I think we still have to put the lens of what information do they need that they can act upon. So if we're talking about CEO of a mom and pop manufacturing company, maybe they do want real-time data because they actually are going to go down to the shop floor and do something that's going to affect some change there. So I would say it's even at that level, don't get too tied up in we can only deliver this information at this lag to that level. It's more about who can solve this problem quickest. Zach.
When you're saying real-time data, you're meaning like equipment process data?
Could be process data, could be calculated as well, right? So typically real-time for me is like telemetry data. So temperature, vibration, fault messages, quality alerts, everything that's generated, let's say, within a 1-minute window. So everybody has a different definition of real-time too, because we'll have customers that come to us and say, I want a real-time dashboard. What does real-time mean to you? Is it 1 second? Is it 1 minute? Is it 20 minutes? Is it?
Like if I think of like real time, like if I'm the CFO and I want to see our real time profitability, like at least every day.
Yeah, probably.
Like not, at the end of the quarter, what was my profitability? You know?
Right.
So that when I think real time for that person, that maybe every hour,
Yeah.
But at least every day, because then you're like, all right, we made money yesterday, we lost money today. What changed? Right.
Yeah, but then we're into end of day info, so right, we're not really real time. I would say I guess it's a good point though. I guess verbiage wise, we could call that something different maybe, because real time I probably would say it was within a minute.
Like an 8 hour window, 8 hour rolling is always real time for the last 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
But in that context, industry matters, right? So
Yeah.
if you're talking like energy, so we don't have lights out factories necessarily in manufacturing, but if we're talking energy, we've got lots of lights out facilities where actually my operations center is a global operations center,
Yeah.
and they
Good
need
point.
KPIs within four seconds. And so I think industry matters as we go towards lights out. If we go towards lights out, that becomes more important from a global operations standpoint versus a site with an operator right standing in front of me.
Yeah.
I would say it should be part of the toolkit in order to react on these kind of requests. Right? So.
That's really why I built this slide.
I like this slide.
Because this slide for me, it kind of talks about all those different challenges that we're solving, all with the foundational idea that we're building this layer that gives us access to information to which we can then build any wide variety and number of use cases on top of. Because we see this with our customers right now. So I actually created this slide to win a project with a customer when they were talking about building foundational architecture of which they were going to deploy applications to 65 factories. And so to do that, we had to kind of create this idea of how are you going to do that from a mentality standpoint. Sure, the architecture is very important as well, but from just thinking about a mentality standpoint of how are we going to deliver value and applications to a bunch of these different factories, that's kind of what started the idea behind this slide.
Yeah, so I like what you were saying about starting with a small project to kind of prove out the value. How do you think, how does Reply Concept think about framing that up for a new company that's come to you and says, hey, we need some help? What kinds of things are you looking at? What kinds of things do you need from them to set that up?
Yeah, it's a good point. What we try to do a lot is get to a factory. And so, again, most of our customers are manufacturing. And so when we get a customer that comes to us to talk about, hey, we want some help in around doing this, we have this factory we want to use as a pilot site, I will always push to, hey, great, where's that factory? I'll be there in a couple of days or whatever timelines align. Because walking the factory is invaluable in understanding where we can drive value. Because within that walk of that factory, you'll meet someone, I guarantee it, that will tell you a problem that they're trying to solve. Or the reason that they brought you there in the first place is because they have a problem in mind. Right? There's not a single plant manager that you talk to that you can ask, what's your worst machine? He's gonna be like, oh, that one. I hate that one. All the time I gotta go to that one. And so, okay, let's start there. Let's start looking at it. We don't know, we might not know what the problem is at first, but we know that machine or that line or that whatever is a problem. And then we start there and we start to drill into figuring out exactly what that, just drill them in. Like, okay, what's the problem in that machine? Oh, every day it's going down for like 4 hours, maintenance is out there all the time. Okay, well, now we have a metric. Okay, let's look at uptime, downtime, fault messages. Yes.
What if that machine is a legacy machine and it's not got the smart capability?
Great question. Great question. It's a straight linear line of value or of costs to data, right? So if the problem that we're trying to solve is just understanding capacity of that line, it's a $100 sensor, right? We throw a vibration sensor on there, we can know when it's running, not running. If you're trying to understand full detail of, let's say it's a lathe or something like that, you want to know spindle speed and a bunch of other stuff, you're going to have to make some investment to get to that data. But I always go back to the customer of like, again, what problem are we trying to solve? And then let's identify the sensors and the equipment that we need to solve that problem. And my record to date is 1946 is the oldest machine I connected. And so we did, it wasn't fancy, but it was enough to know when it was running and when it wasn't running. And that was enough to kind of drive some of the KPIs we were looking at.
I like the conversation about C-suite, not necessarily about the whole real-time discussion, not necessarily consuming asset models. Is it layer X, or I can't tell what was on there?
Yeah, layer X. I don't know what to call it yet. I just put X because, it's kind of the general catch-all.
Between the telemetry data going into there and let's say where C-suite is going to consume data, how many layers or levels of data models do you typically see materialized above that?
Great question, Jeff, as always. Well, I'll take the cop-out answer and say it depends. I personally am a big fan of driving the model contextualization as close to the edge as possible. That's not always a reality that we can achieve. But if we're talking about physical assets in a manufacturing site, 100% we can try to get to that. If we're talking about business objective models, it gets a little blurry. It's a great question. I don't have a good answer, but it's a problem that is trying to be solved in a lot of different organizations right now.
I guess what you're saying is between, let's say, an asset model and let's say how C-suite would need to consume information to plan their enterprise.
Yeah.
How many times do you think that data is materialized or transformed until it's valuable of use?
It's twice. Yeah, it's twice.
Twice.
That's it.
There you go. Twice.
Can you give me an example? So let's say you have a number of pieces produced, right? And then you have energy, right? So now you're saying, okay, so how many gigajoules per ton, that's my KPI, right? So.
Well, I think there's a third model, cost of energy, cost of product, cost of material, cost of labor, cost of the machine, capital expense, operating expense. Yeah. Right. So it depends if you're saying from initiation of the idea of the data to usable data, probably once or twice. But if you're looking at overall to get to that CFO's picture of understanding operating costs and value, probably a lot of different models in that space, right? You hear the idea of multimodality kind of comes into play in that space.
Yeah. And also to the CFO, you have to remove a lot of the noise.
Yep.
Because from his or her perspective, a lot of things they don't care about.
Right.
How do you filter all that and provide them to what they're looking to consume?
So this is a good time to go back to what Brian asked me is the problem that we solved. So before I became an integrator, I spent my entire life in manufacturing. First 15 years of my career, I worked in different roles in manufacturing. The last one before becoming an integrator was with a company called Dana, large tier 1 automotive supplier. We supplied if you drive a 4x4 car, it was a Dana axle that's driving that car. And so we had this problem that was 30 years long at Dana, where when you put the tubes on the center of an axle and you weld it, you test it to see what's called NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. That process generated about 30% scrap a day. Every single day across every single plant that had that process, that was a problem. And so when our CEO tasked us to solve that problem, that was the first place we looked. We said, okay, let's go to the NVH test. Let's look at all the NVH testing that they're doing, what's going on. And then we started to build this information model around every component of that axle, because what we started to find was that we didn't know where that problem was coming from. We caught it at NVH, but we had absolutely zero idea of what was actually causing that problem. And we didn't have the data to understand that at all. Like, we had pockets of information in different plants. We had traceability data. We had good process data, but we weren't capturing all of the diameter of the case when we machined it in Mexico. We weren't capturing the marriage of the ring and the pinion when we machined them in Hungary. And so all of these things started to build this information model around what we figured out was the axle data profile. And it was roughly 10,000 data points at this point. This was 2017, 2018. And the tools were a lot less robust than they are today. So we were just using a ton of data lakes, and we worked with a company out of Canada to do the modeling. But what we ultimately got to is we started to look at, okay, correlation between processes and end result. So we started to look at the failure rates. We had a really good traceability system, so we would know for sure that this came from that line at this time, and we could look at the data specifically. But once we started to really understand how all of those things came together, we started to create these scoring tools that gave us probability of relationship to the problem. And so some of them were, 10% probability that they were related to the problem. And then we got to the point of we could measure to about 80%. And that pointed us all to one single process in the assembly of the case and the tubes. And it was the operator that selected the shim that was going to offset the ring and the pinion inside the case. So every process that happened in every Dana plant that we had, you took a laser measurement of the carrier. You didn't care where the carrier came from, if it was cold outside, because cold makes metal expand. We didn't care about all that. We just took a laser measurement and we told the operator it's a 2 millimeter shim. Basic math calculation, right? What we found is that when we looked at all of the data, that process, that single decision affected 99% of the NVH fallout that we had. So what we did is we put an AI engine in place that looked at all of the data, not just that single measurement on that line, and we were able to take that from a 30% fallout to less than 1%. That was a $2 million profitability pickup in every single plant that we deployed that solution. And this was 2017, before we were even really thinking about UNSs and data and all that type of stuff. But it was clear as day. Like, I remember, I'll never forget, we were in Birmingham, UK on the Jaguar Land Rover line where we were testing this. And everyone that failed during that run, that 8-hour shift, we took off the line and we noted what the operator selected as a shim, what the PLC told us was a shim size. And then we noted what the AI would have generated for that one. We put it back on the line with the AI generated shim selection. And everyone that we took, it was 65 cases, everyone that we put back on the line passed. It was crazy. Yeah, 100%. It was 18 months to get to that point. Yeah, exactly. It was like that first one. We were like, oh, okay, cool, nice. All right, we got one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and it was literally all 65. And we were like, holy shit! I think we figured it out. Yeah, and it was literally 18 months till we got to that point. And like I said before, it was like way before this era. Had we had the data foundation of all those connected plants, then it probably would have took us a month to figure that out. But we had to go and build that foundation too. So again, this is almost 10 years ago now.
So even before you get to that CEO materialized view, you have to first get to every single one of your plants.
Exactly.
Make sure they're providing the right information.
Yeah, it was Mexico, Hungary, and the UK that we used as the pilot sites, because Mexico is where we actually machined the carrier. Győr, Hungary was where we actually machined the ring and the pinion that went into the carrier, and then UK was where we did the final assembly. No, we had to create the historical data. That's why, also probably why it took 18 months. But we were getting flags of things to look at earlier on in the process. But the really interesting thing, and the reason I talk a lot about like the data part of it, is because we had process engineers in this process that would tell us it's 100% that process over there. I've been at Dana for 30 years. I've been building axles for 30 years. It's 100% that problem. Like, that's where the problem is happening. We'd go, we'd look, and we were like, nope, that's not it. And then another process engineer from a different group would be, oh, no, it's 100%, it's that process over there. That plant, 100%, that's where the problem's coming. We go there, nope, that wasn't it. Nobody, not one single process engineer said it was the shim size that was causing the problem. And so this is where you really have to trust that data, because we were chasing a wild goose, right? It was really interesting. And there's a lot of those stories. I'm sure ours is not just the only one.
That reminds me that it could also be the other way around. So we were talking to move the data from the sites to a central data lake. We recently had a situation with a customer. They have started to implement an event-driven architecture, and the question was how long does it take for a person who's responsible for a line to get an information of that central data lake today? And he said it takes us up to 18 months to walk through all the processes up the pyramid and down the pyramid in order to get and receive this information. And with their new infrastructure, the new MQTT-based infrastructure, it's a question of hours.
It's a great point. So the customer that we're all working together on right now, this process, we're building the data foundation in roughly 3-4 weeks, because none of those machines are online. We got to build that foundation first using HiveMQ. And then the model generation part of that we're going to use to do the yield optimization will probably take another 4 to 5 weeks. So in 10 weeks now, we'll have a problem similar to the scale of that, because I can't give away the customer, but they're trying to get 1.7% more yield, which will equate to $250,000 in profit if they can get 1.7% more yield. Again, business values. Go ahead.
You mentioned a little bit about the inductive automation.
Yeah.
And we are here about the HiveMQ. So do you want to talk like how UNS plays a major role in between the inductive automation and the HiveMQ integration?
Sure.
And maybe share some success stories
I think Ignition does a really good job on the lower level side of contextualizing information, right? So with Ignition, we can connect to tons of different platform stuff. It can drive real-time value. There's a lot of tools that we can unlock at that level. But once we start to go to an enterprise play, or if you're starting to look at data beyond just PLC and that sort of information, we need a platform like HiveMQ. So I think and I think HiveMQ would agree, that's why they go to the Inductive conference. I think there's a lot of collaboration between what you use Ignition. Ignition doesn't have technically a native MQTT broker, right? They have the Cirrus Link module, which is great for Sparkplug B. But what about all the other information that is not coming from Ignition? What about sensors that are feeding MQTT direct? What if you have connected product data that's coming MQTT direct? You don't have to funnel everything through a single platform to generate value from it, right? That's kind of the idea of the ecosystem. Everything will have, I could show you a slide from my time at Dana because it's a super interesting one, because we had this ecosystem idea, because everything I think in this space has areas where they can provide value. Ignition, 100%. We're a Ignition Premier integrator. We do a lot of work with Ignition. Everything within that ecosystem can generate some value. And I think there's 100% collaboration between Inductive and HiveMQ. Yeah. All right, I think that's it on time. I know I blew through the presentation, but I kind of much more enjoyed the open conversation, so that was awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. Otherwise, it would be really awkward for me standing up here for 30 minutes, so awesome.